The evening sky was painted in hues of fading gold and soft crimson, as if the sun itself was reluctant to leave the world behind. The gentle breeze carried with it the faint fragrance of blooming jasmine, brushing against the silence of the street. She walked slowly, her slender figure almost glowing under the street lamps. Her steps were unhurried, her eyes lost in thought, as though she carried 1,000 untold stories within her. To anyone watching, she was a vision, mysterious, fragile, yet breathtakingly beautiful. From a distance, he noticed her. His gaze, which had always been indifferent to the crowd, suddenly froze. For the first time in what felt like years, his heart skipped a beat. Something about her presence struck him, an unexplainable pull, like destiny had quietly whispered their names in the same breath. He tried to look away, convincing himself it was nothing, just another passerby. But no matter how hard he tried, his eyes betrayed him. They kept returning to her, tracing the delicate strands of her hair that danced with the wind, the way her lips curved ever so slightly, as if hiding a secret smile. She sensed the weight of his stare and turned her head, their eyes meeting for a fleeting second. It wasn't just a glance, it was an echo, a collision of two worlds in complete silence. Her chest tightened, her breath faltered. She didn't know him, and yet, why did it feel like she had seen those eyes before? Why did her heart whisper a name it had never spoken? The world around them blurred, the traffic, the noise, the endless rush of life. For that one fragile moment, it felt like they were the only two souls alive. He stepped forward, unsure of what he was doing. His voice trembled with hesitation, but his heart demanded to be heard. "Excuse me." The single phrase broke the silence like a pebble rippling across still water. She paused, her body stiffening ever so slightly. Slowly she turned to him, her gaze soft yet cautious. "Yes?" she replied, her voice as gentle as falling rain, carrying both curiosity and restraint. He opened his mouth to speak, but words betrayed him. How could he explain this sudden storm inside him? How could he tell her that in less than a minute, she had become the reason his world no longer felt empty? After a long pause, he managed to whisper, I don't know why, but it feels like I've met you before." Her lips parted, her heartbeat quickened. She wanted to dismiss it, to laugh it off as a stranger's silly attempt at charm. Yet deep within, something stirred. An ache, a memory she couldn't place, a yearning she couldn't deny. For a few seconds, she said nothing. Only her eyes spoke, shimmering with emotions she didn't dare reveal. Finally, she lowered her gaze, forcing a faint smile. Perhaps some stories don't begin with introductions. They begin with recognition. Her words left him breathless. In that moment he knew this meeting was not ordinary. This was the beginning of something neither of them had asked for, but both of them needed. The night sky stretched endlessly above, as if blessing the two strangers who were no longer strangers. And somewhere in the silence of their hearts, a story had already begun writing itself. The night deepened, the city lights shimmering like scattered stars against the darkness. The streets, once crowded, began to empty, leaving behind echoes of hurried footsteps and the faint hum of distant cars. She walked ahead, her delicate figure framed by the glow of street lamps. He followed silently, not too close, not too far, just enough to keep her in sight, as if letting her vanish would mean losing something he hadn't even found yet. Her heart raced with every step. Why was she allowing this stranger's presence to linger around her? Why hadn't she simply turned away when he first spoke? And yet, deep down, she knew the answer, because something about him felt achingly familiar. Suddenly she stopped. He almost stumbled, startled by her sudden halt. Slowly she turned to face him, her eyes glimmering with a quiet storm. "Why are you following me?" she asked, her tone calm but edged with suspicion. He hesitated, his throat dry. For a moment he almost walked away, but the weight of his emotions pressed against his chest, refusing to let him retreat. "I don't know," he admitted softly, his voice raw and unguarded. "All I know is that when I saw you, something inside me wouldn't let go. I can't explain it. I don't expect you to believe me, but it feels like you've been missing from my life, and suddenly you're right here." Her breath caught. His words were reckless, impulsive, yet they rang with sincerity. She wanted to dismiss them as foolishness, but her heart betrayed her. It trembled with recognition, with longing, as though it too had been waiting. She looked away, trying to shield her emotions. "You don't even know me," she whispered, almost to herself. I may not know your name, he said, stepping closer, his voice steady now. But I know your silence. I know the way your eyes hide 1,000 stories. And I know the way my heart reacts when you're near. That can't be a coincidence. Her eyes widened, shimmering with unshed tears she didn't understand. Why was she shaken by a man she had just met? Why did her soul feel like it had stumbled upon something it had lost long ago? A fragile silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, she exhaled, her lips curving into a faint, bittersweet smile. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most foolish. He smiled faintly, his gaze unwavering. Maybe I'm both, but for the first time, being foolish doesn't scare me. Her heart skipped, caught between fear and desire. She wanted to walk away, to bury this encounter before it unraveled her world. Yet her feet refused to move. Something stronger held her there, binding her to this stranger who no longer felt like one. Above them, the moon bathed the night in silver light, silently watching two hearts whisper truths they weren't ready to admit aloud. And though neither of them said it, they both knew. This was not the end. This was only the beginning of a story that destiny had written long before they had met. The night had grown quieter, the world retreating into its slumber, yet their hearts refused to rest. They stood beneath the pale glow of the moon, bound by an invisible thread neither of them could break. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't empty. It pulsed with unspoken emotions, with questions neither dared to voice. Finally, she drew in a breath, gathering the courage to speak. Her voice was soft, trembling, but steady enough to shatter the silence. You've said so much, but you don't even know my name. He froze, realizing she was right. He had bared his heart without even knowing who she truly was. Slowly, with an almost reverent tone, he asked, Then, will you tell me? She hesitated, her lashes lowering as if protecting a secret too fragile to reveal. But something in his eyes, honest, unwavering, almost pleading, made her surrender. My name is Aisha, she whispered, her voice carrying a weight that felt eternal. The moment the name escaped her lips, it settled into his heart like it had always belonged there. He repeated it quietly, almost as though testing the way it felt against his soul. Aisha! Her chest tightened at the way he spoke her name, slow, tender, like a prayer whispered at dawn. And you? She asked softly, her voice barely above a breath. He smiled faintly, his eyes holding hers with unshaken intensity. Arman. Their names hung in the air between them, no longer strangers, no longer undefined. Names that had once been separate now felt as though they had always been meant to be spoken together. Aisha's gaze faltered, her lips pressing into a thin line, as her heart wrestled with emotions she couldn't control. She had always lived cautiously, guarding herself from the chaos of love. And yet here she was, standing under the night sky, allowing a stranger's words to unravel the walls she had so carefully built. She turned away, trying to gather herself. But Arman stepped forward, his voice deep, almost desperate. Aisha, don't walk away. I don't know why this is happening, but I can't lose this moment. Not when it feels like I've waited my whole life for it. Her steps faltered. She clenched her fists, torn between reason and the undeniable pull of her heart. She wanted to tell him it was madness, that people didn't fall into something this intense so quickly. And yet, why did every part of her ache to believe him? Finally, she whispered, her voice trembling with vulnerability. You're a stranger, Arman, and strangers aren't supposed to make you feel like this. Arman's chest rose and fell heavily, his eyes burning into hers. Then let me stop being a stranger. The words hit her like a wave, leaving her breathless. She searched his face for hesitation, for insincerity, but all she found was a man standing bare, offering her something rare, something terrifying. Truth. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her heart screamed for caution, but her soul whispered something else, something dangerously close to surrender. Above them, the night sky seemed endless, and in its silence, two names, Arman and Aisha, had already been carved into destiny. The night had grown colder, though neither of them noticed. The wind stirred gently, brushing past like a reminder that time was moving, even if their world had frozen in that fragile moment. Aisha hugged her arms to herself, not out of cold, but to steady the trembling inside her chest. She had given him her name, and in return, he had given her his. It should have meant nothing, just words, just introductions. Yet it felt like the unlocking of something far greater. Arman, on the other hand, couldn't stop staring at her. Every small gesture, every flicker of emotion across her face carved itself into his memory. He had met countless people in his life, but no one had ever disarmed him like this woman standing in front of him. "You should go home," she said at last, her voice soft but carrying a distance he could feel. "It's late, and you don't even know me." Arman's chest tightened. He wanted to protest, to tell her that knowing her name, knowing the sound of her voice, knowing the way her eyes held secrets, was already enough to bind him to her. But he could see the caution in her gaze, the way she was fighting herself. "I'll go," he replied after a long pause, his tone calm but threaded with ache. "But Aisha, tonight something changed. You can deny it if you want, but I know you felt it too." Her breath caught, her heart betraying her by pounding wildly against her ribs. She turned her face away, refusing to let him see the truth flickering in her eyes. "You're mistaken," she said quietly, though her trembling voice betrayed her. This isn't how life works. You don't just meet someone and—" She stopped, unable to finish, because the very words tasted like lies. Arman stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his voice deep, yet gentle. "Then explain it to me. Explain why a stranger feels like home. Explain why, when you look at me, it feels like we've met somewhere beyond this lifetime." Her lips parted, but no words came. His words pierced her carefully built defenses, pulling at the very core of her soul. She wanted to deny him, but she couldn't deny herself. Silence fell again, thick with emotions neither could contain. Finally, Aisha forced a small smile, fragile as glass. "You sound like a man who believes in fate." Arman's eyes softened, his voice steady. "I don't know what I believe in anymore, but I know this. I believe in you." Her heart twisted painfully at his words. She turned quickly, her steps hurried now, as though running was the only way to escape the storm he had stirred within her. Arman didn't stop her. He simply watched, his chest heavy with a strange mixture of hope and despair. For now, he let her go, but deep within, he knew their story had only just begun. The distance between them grew with every step she took, yet the invisible thread remained, pulling at their hearts no matter how far they walked. And above them, the stars seemed to burn brighter, as though the heavens themselves were silently watching the birth of a love too powerful to be denied. Aisha's footsteps echoed softly as she hurried down the quiet street, but no matter how fast she walked, she couldn't outrun the storm raging inside her. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths, her mind replaying his words again and again. "I believe in you." Why had those simple words shaken her so deeply? Why did they feel like a promise, like something her soul had been waiting to hear? She pressed her hand to her chest, as though trying to calm the wild beating of her heart. "This is madness," she whispered to herself. "He's just a stranger. I can't let this happen." Yet, no matter how much she tried to convince herself, a quiet voice inside refused to be silenced. Meanwhile, Arman stood where she had left him, staring at the path she had taken until she disappeared from sight. His heart felt heavy, yet strangely alive. For the first time in years, he wasn't numb. He wasn't drifting aimlessly. A single encounter had set his soul on fire, and though she had walked away, he knew their connection wasn't something that distance could break. He finally turned, walking towards his home, but every step felt empty without her presence. The city lights blurred around him, his thoughts consumed by the sound of her voice, the way her eyes had looked into his like they carried an entire universe. That night, sleep betrayed them both. Aisha lay in bed, tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling as the moonlight spilled through her window. She tried to push away the memory of him, but it clung stubbornly. Every detail vivid, the way he had spoken her name, the way his eyes had held her as if she was the only person in the world. "Why do I feel this?" she whispered, her voice breaking in the silence. "Why him? Why now?" Her pillow grew damp with tears she couldn't explain, emotions too heavy to bear. Across the city, Arman sat by his window, the night wind brushing against his face. He had poured himself a glass of water, but hadn't touched it. His thoughts were too restless, his heart refusing to calm. For years, he had walked through life like a shadow, carrying scars of a past he never spoke of. a loneliness he had learned to live with. But tonight, one encounter had shattered that silence. "Aisha," he whispered into the night, her name tasting like hope on his lips. Both hearts, though apart, beat to the same rhythm that night, restless, aching, and unwilling to let go. And though neither of them knew it yet, destiny had already decided. This was not the kind of story that ended with a single meeting. This was the kind of story that would test them, break them, and rebuild them, until they could no longer deny the truth of what their souls had already chosen. The morning sun rose gently, scattering golden light across the city. Yet for Aisha, the brightness felt heavy, almost mocking. She moved through her routine like a ghost, sipping tea she couldn't taste, staring blankly at her phone screen. Her mind, however, was nowhere near her small apartment. It was still wandering back to last night. To him. Arman. Every time she tried to focus, his voice returned, his words echoing inside her chest. "I believe in you." Simple, yet powerful, like a key that had unlocked a part of her heart she had long forgotten. "Why can't I stop thinking about him?" she murmured, frustrated. She pressed her palms against her eyes, as though blocking out his memory could erase the ache inside her. But it didn't. It only grew stronger. On the other side of the city, Arman stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with a frown. He was supposed to be getting ready for a meeting, yet his reflection only showed him a man distracted, lost in thoughts of her. For years, he had mastered the art of control. He had taught himself to suppress emotions, to hide pain behind an unshakable exterior. But Aisha's presence had broken through those walls in a single night. She hadn't even tried, and yet she had undone him completely. He picked up his watch but set it down again, sighing heavily. "What is this?" he whispered to himself. "Why does her face follow me everywhere I go?" The city bustled on, unaware of two souls caught in a silent war with themselves. Fate, however, had its own plans. By afternoon, Aisha found herself at the library, her refuge whenever life felt too heavy. The scent of old books and the quiet atmosphere usually brought her comfort. She tucked herself into a corner, trying to lose herself in the pages of a novel. But even there, his shadow lingered. Every word blurred, replaced by his eyes, his voice, the way he had looked at her like she was worth something more. Suddenly she felt a presence near her. Her heart skipped. She looked up and froze. Arman. He stood a few steps away, holding a book in his hand. His gaze locked on her with the same intensity she had been trying so desperately to forget. Her breath caught. For a moment, the world outside vanished. No noise, no time. Only two hearts recognizing each other again, as if destiny had whispered, "This isn't over." "Arman," she breathed, almost in disbelief. He gave a small, almost hesitant smile, his voice low but steady. "I didn't expect to see you here, but maybe fate did." Her heart trembled. She wanted to run, to protect herself, yet a part of her longed to stay, to listen, to fall deeper into this dangerous pull. Because no matter how much she denied it, something far greater than either of them had already begun. The library's silence was so heavy, it felt as though even the air between them held its breath. Aisha's fingers tightened around the book in her hands, her pulse racing uncontrollably. She had never believed in fate, yet standing here, seeing him again, she couldn't deny the cruel sweetness of destiny. Arman took a slow step closer, the corners of his lips curving in that faint, unreadable smile. His eyes, however, betrayed him. They carried the same restless storm that mirrored her own heart. "I thought," she finally whispered, her voice trembling, "that we wouldn't meet again." Arman's gaze softened, but there was a fire hidden deep within. "Some meetings," he said quietly, "aren't meant to be forgotten. They return. No matter how far we try to run." Her throat went dry. She wanted to reply, to argue, to deny this pull, but every word got lost in the thunder of her heartbeat. For a moment, neither moved. The weight of unspoken feelings lingered between them, fragile and dangerous, like glass ready to shatter. Then, suddenly, Aisha rose to her feet, clutching her bag. "I can't do this," she whispered sharply, her voice cracking. "I can't." She turned, rushing towards the exit, but before she could disappear, Arman's hand reached out instinctively, catching her wrist. Her entire body froze. His touch was firm, yet gentle, as though he was afraid she would break. Slowly, she looked back at him, her eyes shimmering with confusion and something far more vulnerable. "Aisha," he said, his voice rough, almost pleading. "Why are you running from what's already here?" Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. Tears stung at the corners of her eyes. "Because if I don't run now, I'm afraid I'll never be able to leave." The silence that followed was deafening. His grip loosened, but he didn't let go completely. His eyes searched hers, finding pieces of himself in her fear, in her longing. Finally, with a trembling breath, she pulled her hand free. Without another word, she rushed out, leaving him standing amidst the shelves, his heart heavy yet burning with determination. As the library door closed behind her, Arman whispered under his breath, almost like a vow only fate could hear. "You can run, Aisha, but I will find you again." Because some connections are not accidents. They are destiny's design. इसमें मैं दोनों के अलग-अलग दर्द और अंदर के कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को और गहरा बनाता हूँ, ताकि इमोशनल कनेक्शन और स्ट्रॉन्ग हो जाए. The city outside was alive with laughter, honking cars and rushing footsteps. But for Aisha, everything blurred into a distant hum. She walked quickly, her chest tight, her eyes burning. Every step away from him felt like dragging a part of herself she didn't want to lose. She stopped under a streetlight, clutching her bag against her chest, breathing heavily. Her heart screamed at her to turn back, to just let herself fall into the warmth of what she had found in his eyes. But her mind, scarred and cautious, whispered, "No, don't trust this. Don't trust him." Tears welled in her eyes. Why can't I let go?" She whispered into the night. "Why does he feel like someone I've always known?" Meanwhile, across the city, Arman sat in the quiet corner of his apartment, his jacket tossed carelessly onto the couch. A glass of untouched water sat on the table before him. His hand rested against his forehead, his thoughts tangled in the memory of her pulling away, in the pain of watching her run. He had lived a life filled with masks, polished smiles for the world, firm handshakes for business partners, empty nights drowned in silence. And for the first time in years, someone had cracked through the walls he had so carefully built. Her, Aisha, he breathed, her name a fragile prayer on his lips. "Why do you keep running, when I'm the only one who can see your pain?" He leaned back, his gaze fixed on the ceiling, fighting the ache clawing at his chest. He had promised himself once, never again. Never again would he let anyone close enough to destroy him. But fate had a cruel way of testing promises. And now, despite every reason to stay guarded, he found himself longing for her more than anything else in the world. That night, neither of them slept. Aisha tossed and turned, clutching her pillow as if it could shield her from the truth. Arman sat awake until dawn, staring out the window, watching the stars fade into morning light. Two souls, worlds apart yet bound by the same torment, hearts in denial, yet craving each other with a hunger they could no longer control. The next morning dawned with a cruel irony. Bright skies, warm sunshine, and the illusion of peace. For Aisha, however, it was anything but peaceful. She sat at her desk in the small office where she worked, her pen motionless in her hand, papers untouched. Her colleagues moved around her, their chatter filling the room, but none of it reached her. Her mind was elsewhere, caught in the prison of a single thought, him. Arman's voice, his gaze, his touch on her wrist. It haunted her like a half-forgotten melody that refused to fade. "No," she whispered under her breath, forcing her eyes back to the papers. "I can't let this control me. I won't." But her hand trembled, betraying her heart. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Arman sat in a meeting, expensive suits and polished words surrounding him. Yet his mind wasn't on profits or contracts. Every time someone spoke, he nodded absently, his jaw tight, his thoughts drifting to a woman who had turned his carefully ordered world upside down. He excused himself halfway through, stepping outside onto the balcony of the glass building. The city stretched before him, endless and restless, but all he could think of was finding her again. "Why do I feel like I've known her forever?" he muttered, frustration and longing mixing in his tone. "Why does she matter this much when I barely know her?" That afternoon, as if the universe had finally decided to answer, fate intervened. Aisha had stepped out during her lunch break, seeking air to clear her head. She wandered into a quiet street lined with cafes, her hands buried deep in her bag as she walked quickly, lost in thought. And then, she stopped. Across the street, tall and composed, stood Arman. His eyes lifted, And in that exact moment, they locked with hers. The world stilled. The rush of cars, the noise of footsteps, the chatter of strangers, all of it disappeared. There was only him, only her, and the undeniable pull that neither could escape. Her breath caught. His chest tightened. Fate had spoken again. Slowly, he crossed the street, every step measured, his gaze never leaving hers. Aisha wanted to turn away, to run as she had before, but her feet refused to move. Her heart beat so wildly she thought it might tear through her ribs. When he finally stood before her, the distance between them small enough to feel his presence, he spoke. His voice low, steady, carrying the weight of something he could no longer deny. Aisha, how many times do we have to cross paths before you believe this isn't an accident? Her lips parted, trembling, but no words came. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not of sadness, but of fear. Fear of what this meant. Fear of what she might lose if she let herself give in. And yet, deep inside, a quiet truth whispered. She didn't want to escape anymore. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them on that bustling street, as if time itself had bowed to their unspoken truth. Aisha's hands clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles pale, while Arman's gaze held her with a weight that left no escape. Arman, her voice broke, fragile as glass. We shouldn't, this can't. He stepped closer, not recklessly, but with a quiet determination that silenced her protest. Why not? He asked softly, though there was an edge of pain in his tone. Tell me, Aisha, why does your heart race every time we meet? Why do your eyes hold the same questions as mine? Her throat tightened. She looked away, trying to shield herself with denial, but he gently tilted his head, forcing her eyes back to his. I don't know what you mean, she whispered, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. A faint smile touched his lips, though his eyes were burning. You're lying to me and to yourself. I can see it. I can feel it. Aisha's heart quivered. Her mind screamed to run, to end this before it consumed her completely. But her soul had already surrendered the moment their paths had first crossed. Arman. Her whisper cracked, her tears glistening under the afternoon sun. I've lost too much before. I can't afford to lose myself again. For the first time, his expression softened into something raw, almost broken. He reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against hers, careful, hesitant, like a man terrified of scaring away something fragile. You won't lose yourself, he murmured, his voice rough with sincerity. You'll find yourself in me, just like I found myself in you. Her breath hitched, her defenses crumbling with every word he spoke. The chaos of the street returned faintly around them, cars passing, people rushing, but none of it touched them. In that fragile, fleeting moment, they were standing in their own world, suspended between fear and desire. Her fingers trembled, almost pulling away, but then, to her own surprise, she didn't. She let his hand linger, warmth flooding her veins, melting away the ice she had been clinging to for years. And though her lips whispered nothing, her silence spoke louder than words. For the first time, Arman allowed himself a true smile. Not polished, not guarded, just real. Destiny had brought them together again. But choice, their choice, was what bound them now. The afternoon sun had already begun to fade, leaving the city painted in soft shades of gold and crimson. Yet for Aisha, the world around her felt unbearably heavy. Her hand still tingled where his fingers had touched her, her heart still echoing with his words. She walked quickly, as though distance could save her, but no matter how far her steps carried her, she could not escape the storm inside. His voice haunted her. You'll find yourself in me, just like I found myself in you. Tears welled up, blurring her vision. She ducked into a quiet park, sitting on a bench, clutching her bag tightly to her chest. No, she whispered shakily, shaking her head as though denying herself could erase the truth. I can't let this happen. I can't risk it. Memories she had buried long ago surged to the surface. Loss, betrayal, promises that had shattered and left her broken. She had built walls around her heart for a reason, and now one man threatened to tear them down without even trying. Meanwhile, across the city, Arman stood in his office, staring out at the skyline as night slowly draped itself across the buildings. His staff had left hours ago, but he remained, lost in thought. His reflection in the glass showed a man who had everything and nothing. Power, wealth, respect, but no one who truly saw him until her Aisha. Her name alone carried warmth he hadn't felt in years. And yet she kept running. He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "You're afraid," he whispered into the silence. "But what you don't know, Aisha, is that I'm just as afraid. I've lost too much too, but still, I can't let you go." The weight of his confession pressed against his chest, a silent vow forming in his heart. He would wait, he would fight, no matter how many walls she built, no matter how many times she ran, because some connections were not meant to be broken. That night, as the stars lit the sky, two restless souls lay awake in different corners of the city, one fighting to let go, the other refusing to. And though neither spoke the words aloud, both hearts echoed the same truth. This was only the beginning. The next day dawned bright, but for Aisha the sunlight felt harsh, almost accusing. She moved through her routine mechanically, washing, dressing, walking to work, yet every step carried the weight of the night before. His words still echoed in her heart. "You'll find yourself in me, just like I've found myself in you." She pressed her hand against her chest as she walked, whispering to herself, "Stop thinking about him. Stop it." But no matter how hard she tried, the truth refused to be silenced. Inside her office, she buried herself in paperwork, her pen moving furiously across the pages. Yet every time she blinked, his face appeared behind her eyelids. His eyes, his touch, the sincerity in his voice, they haunted her like a shadow that would not leave. By afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. She left early, telling her manager she wasn't feeling well. But instead of going home, her feet carried her aimlessly through the streets until she found herself once again at the park where she had cried the night before. She sat on the same bench, staring at the ground, lost in the maze of her thoughts. "Why do you keep following me, Arman?" she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Why can't I be free of this?" Unbeknownst to her, at that very moment, Arman sat in his car across the street. He hadn't followed her intentionally. Fate had led him here, just as it always seemed to. He had been driving aimlessly, trying to quiet his restless heart. And now here she was, sitting alone, fragile and broken in the place where she thought no one could see her. His hand gripped the steering wheel tightly. A part of him wanted to get out, to go to her, to promise her she wasn't alone. But another part stopped him. She was already afraid, already running. If he pushed too hard, she would only run faster. So he sat there in silence, watching her from a distance, his heart aching with every tear she shed. Under his breath, he whispered words she couldn't hear, words carried away by the wind. "I'll wait, Aisha. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait, because you're worth every moment of patience." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, two souls remained close yet apart, bound by an invisible thread neither could sever, yet separated by the fragile distance fear had created. The days passed, but for Aisha, peace never returned. Every corner of the city reminded her of him. The streets, the cafes, even the soft wind brushing against her skin, it all carried fragments of Arman. One evening, she stood by her window, staring at the restless sky. Thunder rumbled in the distance, clouds gathering like her own storm within. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, whispering, "Why can't I let you go? Why do you feel like the very air I need to breathe?" Lightning split the sky and tears rolled down her cheeks. She tried to silence her heart, but the truth kept rising louder. She didn't just miss him, she needed him. And somewhere across the city, Arman stood beneath the same storm, the rain drenching him as he walked without an umbrella. His steps were heavy, but his heart was certain. He had decided. He would no longer let fear stand between them. The next afternoon, fate intervened again. Aisha, running late from work, rushed into a quiet bookstore to take shelter from sudden rain. She brushed droplets from her hair, sighing in frustration, only to freeze when she saw him. Arman was there, standing by the shelves, holding a book in his hand. For a moment, neither moved. Their eyes met, and the storm outside seemed to fade into silence. "Aisha," his voice broke the stillness, soft yet filled with everything he hadn't said. She swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she clutched her bag. "Why is it always you? Why do you keep appearing wherever I go?" He took a step closer, his expression unreadable yet tender. "Because I don't believe it's coincidence anymore. Do you?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was an answer in itself. Arman gently placed the book back on the shelf, his gaze never leaving hers. You can keep denying it, Aisha, but your eyes, they confess what your lips refuse to. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. She turned away, her heart racing, but his words clung to her like a second heartbeat. That night, Aisha lay in bed, restless, staring at the ceiling as the echoes of his voice haunted her. Your eyes confess what your lips refuse to. She pressed her hands over her face, tears slipping through her fingers. She was terrified, not of him, but of herself. Terrified of how much she already cared, of how deeply she had fallen without meaning to. Across the city, Arman sat alone in his study. The lights dim, a glass of untouched wine on the table. His thoughts were consumed by her. The fragility in her voice, the fear in her eyes, the way her presence both healed and shattered him at once. He leaned back, closing his eyes, whispering into the silence. You're running from love, Aisha, but love is already running inside you. Two souls, lost yet bound, drifting in circles, yet pulled by the same gravity, both afraid of the truth, yet both unable to let it go. And though they didn't know it yet, destiny was already weaving the next thread of their story, one that neither fear nor distance could break. Aisha thought ignoring her heart would protect her. She buried herself in work, surrounded by people, drowning in tasks. But silence always found her, and in silence, it was always his name that echoed. Late at night, she stood before the mirror, searching her reflection with hollow eyes. Who am I becoming? Why does he feel like a shadow I can't escape? The next day, at a family gathering, someone mentioned Arman casually. The way her heartbeat spiked, the way her smile faltered. It didn't go unnoticed. Her cousin teased lightly. Aisha, why do you look like you just heard your secret? She forced a laugh, but inside she shattered. She knew her breaking point was near. She couldn't keep running forever. Fate, again, refused to let them drift apart. One evening, Aisha's car broke down on a lonely road. Rain began pouring, and she stood helpless, dialing numbers that no one picked up. Just when despair was about to consume her, headlights cut through the rain. The car stopped, and Arman stepped out, an umbrella in hand. Her breath caught. You? He didn't waste a second. He held the umbrella over her, shielding her from the storm. His voice was low but steady. Some storms don't need fixing, Aisha. Sometimes you just need someone to stand beside you. For the first time, she didn't argue. She let him stay. As they waited together for help, silence wrapped around them. Not heavy, but strangely comforting. She glanced at him, and for a fleeting moment, she saw not the man she feared, but the man who made her heart feel safe. That glimpse was enough to weaken the walls she had built for so long. Days later, she found herself at his doorstep. She hadn't planned it, hadn't thought it through. Her heart had simply led her there. When Arman opened the door, surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by something softer. Aisha! She stood frozen, her hands trembling, eyes glistening with unspoken words. For a long moment neither spoke. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Finally she whispered, almost inaudible. I'm tired of pretending. Arman's chest rose sharply. His gaze locked on her trembling lips. Then don't pretend, not with me. A tear slid down her cheek as he stepped closer, his hand hesitating before brushing it away. His touch was careful, as if she were fragile glass. Their eyes met, and in that silence, their hearts spoke louder than words ever could. And though no promise was made, both knew something had changed forever.